If you've ever thought, someday I'm going to write a book, but kept putting it off, then you have something in common with an energetic author who first published at 87 years old. Meet Geraldine Phillips Davis. Her story, one of miracles. It started in the small town of Fitzgerald, Georgia, which she remembers fondly as an unusual place.
The town was established by Northerners, not Southerns. And so their attitude about black people were different. And so we had a different kind of town altogether. And for example, when I was growing up, my dad used to talk with us at night and tell us what was going on in South Georgia. And he would say sadly, well, they lynched another black man. We said, oh, Dad, really? Yes. Somebody would say, where, Daddy? And he would say, in Douglas or in Tifton or some other town. Fitzgerald was developed by a philanthropist from up north, New England. And he was looking for a place to help the soldiers after the Civil War. And they had been wounded, and he thought that up north was too cold for them and that they would have to stay in all of the time to stay out of the snow, and they would do better if they could live in a place where they could go out and get fresh air and sunshine, and it would help them to get better soon. That's the way he felt. So he went down to Florida looking for a place where he could start a town and where these young soldiers could live. When he got down there, he didn't like it because he said there were too many snakes and too many alligators. So he left and started back up north, but he happened to go through a portion of Georgia in the south, and he said that he found this place that he liked, and he asked the government to let him establish a town there and bring those wounded soldiers down there to live, and they should do much better. And the government agreed that he could establish a place to bring the wounded soldiers down. And he was a wealthy philanthropist, and he set that town up himself. It was a railroad town. That meant that black men could get jobs out there at that railroad, and they paid good money. So it allowed African Americans to be middle class citizens in Fitzgerald. And they had nice homes, nice cars, travel, and they could travel free because they worked for the railroad, you know. And also a law was passed that said that they couldn't pay the railroad workers up north one wage, and then pay the ones in the south a lower wage. And so what happened was they were very middle class. They were paid the same as the people up north, the men up north, but the cost of living wasn't as high. So they really had it good. And my daddy worked out there. And we lived in a nice home and had nice cars and nice furniture, and we traveled and everything, and could go downtown in Fitzgerald and buy from the best stores. He heard soon after he got Fitzgerald established that the Ku Klux Klan was going to march in Fitzgerald. And he got the mayor, the chief of police, and all of the policemen, and the southerner who owned most of the land in Fitzgerald before Mr. Fitzgerald came, owned the land all the way to the county line. And they went out to the county line and they set up a roadblock. And they took the cars and parked them facing where the Ku Klux Klan was going to come through. And every one of them out there, including the white man who was a Southern, but he was the richest Southerner in Fitzgerald. And they all had guns, and they were loaded. And this was at night when the Ku Klux Klan was going to march in Fitzgerald. But when they got to the county line, there was a barricade there. And when they got there, the mayor said, "You can't come in this town." And all of a sudden, everybody cocked their guns. And the Ku Klux Klan members had their torches high and their white suits on with the tall white caps, and you could see nothing but their eyes. Everything else was covered. And when that barricade, when all of those men cocked their guns, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan said, "I think we better leave," he said to his men. And they had to turn around and leave. They never did come back again. And also, not only did they march with their torches through towns in the South, they would also kill black people. And it could be over nothing but a black man has a nice home. And although he lived 2 doors from the white school, they couldn't, Fitzgerald couldn't change the state law. So we had to go over to the black school on the east side. And that was something that he couldn't change. But there were other things too, because there were even towns in South Georgia where black people couldn't walk on the same sidewalk with white people. They had to walk on the other side, sort of like it was in South Africa, you know. And the Jews that he brought down there owned all of the stores. And you know, the Jews had been slaves in Egypt. So they weren't interested in mistreating us. So it was a good town.
Fitzgerald is home to her fondest memories, like grade school and Monitor High.
I loved school. And I became a reader, because many times when we would start playing in the morning, during the summer when school was out, I could play before the sun would start rising. And when the sun came out, that ended it for me. I couldn't stand the sun and the heat. And I would go get a book, get in the swing on the front porch, and read. I read everything, magazines, newspapers, books, the Bible, anything I could find. And I remember one summer, I read of a fairy tale book that had over 2,000 pages in it. And I was determined I was going to read every story in there. And I read it. So I became passionate about reading.
Many of her high school memories were captured in photographs and reside in the Blue and Gray Museum. This seemingly sleepy town appears to be a birthplace for a lot of things.
The Queensland School and the Monitor schools here were among the first African-American schools to be founded in the state of Georgia. All kinds of things like that were actually pioneered here in the city of Fitzgerald.
As a child, Gerri had a love for words, and she had an imagination that kept her going during the awkward years. A sickly child and self-described as different, she believed she was the only person in town to wear glasses.
And then the next thing that hurt me so badly was when I started the school when I was 6 years old, I had to start wearing glasses. And nobody in my family wore glasses. And then at school, nobody in my class wore glasses. So I was like the odd one, I thought. And I never could figure out why everything wasn't right for me and it was right for everybody else. And in retrospect, I can go back and see where he was helping me. For example, at school, every play that they had, operetta they used to call them, and they would make dresses for you to be a flower, and they would make them out of paper, and they would be so pretty. But guess what they would do for me? I had to do the lead. I was the main character, and they would even make me sing, and I didn't want to sing. But anyway, I can see now that I was being blessed all the time.
She found solace and her voice when she graced her own private stage in the family parlor.
I started telling my own stories, and my mother had a big, pretty it was a pink chair in a corner, and it was barrel back, big, like that. And I could get behind that and hide. And I would go and get behind that barrel back chair and tell stories to myself. I would be back there saying, once upon a time, and I would tell my story, but I didn't want nobody to hear that that was my story. You couldn't be a part of that.
After high school, she headed to Spelman College in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, and very close to Morehouse College. There, Gerri met a young man who shared a passion for justice, but his was at another level.
So I was in the Glee Club at Spelman, and Martin Luther King was in the chorus over at Morehouse. And once a year, the two schools would get together and have a combination program. And so that particular year, we went there that night, and the community and the families were invited in. The place was crowded with people and everything, and we sang together, Morehouse and Spelman. And after the program was over, we went outside, and everybody was sort of chatting, And this young man over there pointed toward me. He said to one of the other Morehouse men, "Who is that over there?" And he said, "Her name is Geraldine. They call me Gerri, but that's Geraldine Davis. No, Phillips, my former name." And he said, "I'd like to meet her." So the Morehouse man brought him over there and introduced him to me. And he didn't stay there long, but he said, is it all right if I come over to see you Sunday? And I said, I didn't take it serious. I said, okay. Sunday afternoon, he showed up. The next Sunday, he came back again. And he amazed me because his ideals were too far ahead of his peers. And he would come over and talk about Mahatma Gandhi to me. And at that time, I had just finished high school. I didn't know who Mahatma Gandhi was. And they didn't teach that in school to us, you know, about him. And so, Mahatma Gandhi, who is that? But anyway, and the next Sunday he would come, he would talk about Moses leading the people out of Egypt. And I go, Moses, well, I had heard that in Sunday school and church. But still I wondered why. And my interest was, when is the next football game? What's playing at the Fox Theater? You know, things like that. And every time he would come, he would talk about the same thing. And then I got curious about him. And I found out that the young men at Morehouse didn't understand him. And I couldn't understand him. And then he started talking about something else. He wanted to start a crusade to free black people. He felt like we were still, you know, in bondage, like the people in Egypt when Moses led them out. And he was so serious about it, he wouldn't be clowning or talking and laughing. He was talking business. Now, and we didn't know anything about anybody leading a civil rights movement. He started talking about a civil rights movement to me. What is he talking about? So anyway, I just didn't understand him, and he got so serious about what he wanted to do, and nobody understood him. He started talking with the president of Morehouse because he understood him. And he got so, he would pray in the daytime, and the other kids would laugh at him. Well, he's gone into they had a little prayer house on the campus where you could go in and pray. They say he's gone in there again. And I said to myself, he was still coming to see me and still talking about Moses and his civil rights movement. I said, when I meet another Morehouse man, I'm going to let Martin Luther King go. I don't understand anything he's talking about. And I did. I met another young man, and when he would come, you know, they had a system. When a young man would come to see you from Morehouse, they had to go through your house matron. They had to go to her. And then she would call on the PA. Geraldine Davis, I keep calling myself Davis. Geraldine Phillips, you have a caller, and you had to go down to the, like I said, the living room and sit there. If anybody else has company, they would be sitting there too and entertain them unless you wanted to walk the sidewalks. And so I met someone else, and the next Sunday when he came, and my house matron called, Geraldine Phillips, you have a caller. I wouldn't go down.
You know, when Dr. King started to
Became famous.
Yes.
I recognized who he was then and what he was trying to do when he was talking to me and his president. because he didn't have too much to do with anyone else. And my family teased me, and all of my friends said, "You were crazy. You could have been Mrs. Martin Luther King." I said, I didn't know he was going to become famous. And that's what I told the students at Spelman College when my book was published. I said, I didn't know he was really going to start a civil rights movement. I didn't know he was going to become the most famous black man in America. I didn't know that they were going to build a statue of him in Washington, D.C. I didn't know he would win Nobel Peace Prize. I didn't know any of that. So I got teased a lot. They said, you should have stuck with him. You could have been Mrs. Martin Luther King. I would tell everybody that no, it happened like it should have, that I wasn't the right person for him. I wasn't brave enough, because I wouldn't have been marching in those civil rights movement on the front line where people with guns might shoot me. And they set his church on fire. I wouldn't like that. And they even went to his house and tried to kill his children. I said, see, I would have left him if I had married him. I said, I would have taken my children and I would have gone back to my mama. I wouldn't be out there marching with him. I'm too scared, you know. And also, I think that the lady whom he married was smarter than I was, and she was braver than I was. You see, she stayed with him through everything he did. And then when he died, she managed the community that they started in honor of him. And she got it through the President of the United States. You see, she was a smart lady, so she was the right one.
Well, you and Dr. King.
But guess what happened?
Okay.
People told me that I looked like his wife.
Well, I was thinking about that earlier picture.
Really?
As soon as you start to speak about that, that picture kind of reminds.
Well, that's what people told me. Say, you remind me of Martin Luther King's wife.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Well, but I think she was the right person.
She often reminisces about the good times and the not so good ones. She adores both her parents, but appears to be a daddy's girl.
My dad was a hard worker, and he didn't only work for the railroad, he was an entrepreneur. My daddy had his own farm. It wasn't a plantation, it was a small farm with a house on it, a little house. And he hired an older black man to take care of that farm. While he was out there at the shop, someone was there taking care of his farm. And we used to laugh about him at night when we would be sitting down and Mama would have her own school. You had to go to school twice a day if you were her child. We went to school on the other side of town at night. She had her school. And she had so many children, she would have spelling bees and she would check all of our homework and make us do it over if it wasn't right. But anyway, my dad worked very hard to make sure that his children and his family had everything the middle-class white people had. He finally got hurt at the railroad. And when he got injured, he couldn't work again. He stayed in the hospital for a whole year. And so, but after he couldn't work, he went downtown and built a restaurant. And it was a real restaurant, not a sandwich place where you could go and they used to cook a lot of fish sandwiches and chicken sandwiches in little towns. And it wasn't that, it was a real restaurant. with tables and what's the other thing called? That you sit in on the booths, and had a big counter in there, and my mother, and he did another thing. He started a cab line, a taxi line, and he had 6 taxis, and he was the first black man to have a line of taxis in Fitzgerald, and there is something, I haven't even seen it myself because it happened recently. They have a little museum there in Fitzgerald, and they have him there telling about he was the first African American to have a line of cabs and taxis in Fitzgerald.
And when she married, her groom was a lot like her father.
After 2 years, my husband got us a little house, and we moved. You know what he did? He did whatever he saw my daddy do. I didn't go buy no groceries. He went and bought the groceries.
After an accomplished career as a teacher, counselor, and newspaper columnist in Miami, Florida, this international traveler settled to write. Her golden years brought her back to her home state of Georgia, specifically Warner Robins, where she added to her family.
And one day, a pretty young lady came across the street. They had just moved in to the house across the street from me. And she said, I came over to meet you. I've been watching you, and you seem like a very nice lady, and I don't know anyone, so let's do some things together. She had lost her mother. I had lost my daughter. I was so lonely, and she was so sad and lonely. And finally I said to her, you know, I'm so glad I met you, because I was so lonely. I missed my daughter so much. I said I needed someone, and you came over and became my friend. And she said, and I needed a mother, because I missed my mother. And today, we are still close, and they are like my children. Now, she and her husband, and they see about me. They call me every day to see how I'm doing. If I have any needs, or want to go anywhere or anything, they see about me.
I first met this Georgia peach at a tea for her dear friend Marcia K. Moore. Her style made a statement to many in the room, elegant, regal, and worthy of a double take. Moore says her beauty is an inside job as well, and she has learned a lot from Gerri.
Our regular conversations, it was kind of like going to class, but a class that you loved. We would just chat about our own families and about the time in history that she grew up in, and then I would let her know. I remember that because my parents were in that same period, and we heard so much from them.
And my daughter.
In spite of early sickness, glasses, and color, Mrs. Geraldine Phillips Davis is an energy field all her own, still using words to create characters, build friendships, and to brighten days with humor, joy, and smiles.